Hey there, YouTube land. In my last video, I mentioned that I was going to travel to a rugby festival in North Dorset over the weekend. Well, I went off, had a really good time, and I took some footage of the ride up and some pics while I was there. And unfortunately, I ran out of space on my SD card, so didn't record all of the journey up and none of the journey home. So, lessons to myself around getting more than one SD card for these long trips. Anyway, it was my first moto camping experience as well, and what I needed to do was load up my bike and see how I could put everything together and make sure I had everything I needed for a weekend away and a rugby festival. During this ride, I have decided to do something really quite brave and tell you the story of how I got to be Julie. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Some of you might not appreciate it. And if you're just here to watch the ride, then just mute the conversation and just enjoy the ride. I'm really not offended either way, but I'd love to tell my story and I hope you enjoy listening to it. Right, so here we go. This actually turned out to be a 3-hour ride, the longest single ride I've ever done on a motorcycle. And it was just such an incredible journey. So loving riding the bigger bike. I just had the best time, and I hope you'll enjoy the visuals as you ride with me and enjoy the story. Here we go. So, I'd like to use this journey to talk about my personal journey that I've been through over the last 6 years. So, I wasn't actually born a girl, I was a boy, and I am transgender. I suppose some of you viewers might have clocked this, but anyway, I thought I would use this opportunity just to share my story. So I remember when I was about 3 or 4 being dressed up by my 2 older sisters as a girl. In my earliest recollections of this time, I recall feeling right. Later, I would question whether this was just because doing so made me feel included. My parents sent us to a primary school boarding school, and it was very difficult for me as it was very traditional where boys were boys, bullying was accepted as part of the tradition. It'll toughen you up, son, they would say, and there was no tolerance for softies. Being a townie, and this school was in the middle of nowhere in Zimbabwe, really contributed to the isolation. I was isolated from my sisters as well, as despite being co-ed, it was frowned upon for the boys and girls to mix. It was during these early years at the school that I became more conscious of the desire to be a girl. I would question whether it was down to the fact that the girls' side of the school seemed to me to be more peaceful and less overtly aggressive. So it was then, when I was about 8, that during school holidays I would dress in my sister's clothes. I loved the softness and how it made me feel something deeply emotional inside. Like this is how I was meant to be. The trauma really got worse and worse, and I can recall joining Rhema Youth, sort of Bible bashing church group at the school and impeaching God to set this wrong right. Things became abundantly worse in 1980 when my immediately older sister left the school for high school. This was something of a double whammy for me, as not only was I now left all alone at the school, whilst my sisters were now day scholars living at home. Later, I would question whether this, too, contributed to my desire to be a girl, as I perceived I would then be able to live in the girls' hostel, and when I left school, I could also live at home. So as you can imagine, being sent to another boarding school was traumatic for me when I went to high school. This school was even more isolated and very male-dominated. The school definitely advantaged strong male kids with a great emphasis being placed on manly activities like rugby, bush sports and athletics. I don't ever think I felt suicidal, but I certainly felt isolated, and I've always felt very different to the other guys. I never really felt, nor ever have felt, like I was a homosexual. I've had periods where I've fantasized about a homosexual relationship, but have never followed up on the desire to follow. I've never had the desire to follow through this in reality. I never wanted to have homosexual sex, but strongly desired to have sex with a man as a woman. This was more traumatic, as homosexuality seemed to me would have been a relatively easier path. My holidays were split between my mother in Harare and my father, who was living in Johannesburg. This made forming relationships in the early years of high school very difficult. Consequently, I spent most of this time alone when I wasn't at school, and most of it closeted, if you'll excuse the expression, at home in drag. In 1985, my mother agreed to let me go and live with my dad in Johannesburg. I was put into day scholar school and felt that this was a new beginning for me and my relationship with my father. Sadly, though, he failed to meet the challenge and seemed happy with his selfish, self-absorbed life with my stepmother, and didn't really have time for me. He continued to play golf 3 times a week, work late, and spend what little time was left with my stepmother. I tried to engage with him by taking up squash and golf, hoping he'd teach me, but he just signed me up with the country club and school coaching staff. The one sport I did love, for myself, was ice hockey. However, this too was a problem for my father, as he believed only scummy kids hung out at the ice rink. He once refused to fetch me from the rink, and I missed the last bus, and he forced me to walk home through some of the worst parts of Johannesburg. Again, I was struggling to make friends, and other than 2 great guys who I skated with, who my father naturally disapproved of. My cross-dressing got worse, as I would steal my stepmother's clothes. My stepmother tried to deal with this by locking her dressing room, which I got around by stealing and copying the key. It was not going well. Rather than engage me, my father waited till I was on holiday with my mother and phoned me to say that when I returned, he'd be sending me to a boys' boarding school in South Africa. Faced with this possibility, I elected to return to the boarding school I went to in Zimbabwe. That was when I started meeting more girls. I got on well with girls and enjoyed the time with them and developed a number of friendly relationships. Although I got on well enough with my schoolmates, I really only bonded around smoking and other rebellious activities. Despite the seeming normality of my life, good friends, I was enjoying school and school holidays by now, girlfriends, parties, and all things adolescent. I just could never shake or get beyond this yearning to be a girl. I was so jealous of the way girls were able to dress. I loved the idea of being able to wear makeup, miniskirts, and long hair. It drove me crazy. My sister caught me cross-dressing once and, bless her, tried really hard to talk to me about it. But I just couldn't. It drove me crazy. I didn't want to be a man in girls' clothes. I wanted to be a girl. After school, I went to live with my mum in Harare. I had about 3 jobs in 3 months, trying desperately to figure out what I wanted to do. I had sex for the first time when I was 19. She was a beautiful girl with a great figure, really sweet and nice. I enjoyed it, but realized from the outset that I always wished to be on the other side. After mulling through a number of jobs and relationships, I moved to the UK, mostly for career reasons, but also to try to connect with my father again, who by now was living in London. 4 years I spent in the UK. It was pretty lonely for me, and for the first couple of years I really struggled. I lived on my own, which was a bonus, as I was able to dress however I pleased at home. But no matter how hard I tried, I was always consumed by the fact that I was a man in drag, not a woman. There was just no information about transgender in those days. Unfortunately, all I was exposed to was the weird world of transsexuals through porno magazines, and I didn't identify with that either. It seemed to me that even if I could reassign my gender, I would forever be on the periphery of society, not able to lead a normal life and still not be considered a real woman. My fear of isolation and need for acceptance drove me to bury my feelings deeply to secret recesses of my being, and to only get on with living and to get on with living a normal life. I had my first major relationship with a girl who was also from Zimbabwe. She was fantastic, and we moved in, and she found my stash while I was at work. And when I got home, she had merely announced that she didn't want to know and had thrown them out. She probably figured they were a collection from previous girlfriends. We never discussed it, and I never told her. I returned to Zimbabwe in 1994 when my mother got ill. After she passed, I moved to Johannesburg and tried to live a quote-unquote normal life, while always carrying this burning with me. I got married, settled down, had 2 kids. My first marriage broke up for pretty much normal reasons, if there is such a thing. My first wife was devoutly Catholic, and through my searching to understand myself and life, I have become pagan, and those two just don't mix. She is also a very hard woman, not feminine at all, a verbal bully, and ultimately I needed to be with someone more empathetic, soft and feminine. I had a number of functional, loving and successful relationships before I met my second wife. We actually met online at Match.com. We clicked, excuse the pun, right from the beginning. She is a 3rd degree Wiccan priestess. I didn't really define myself as pagan when we met, but since understanding my spiritual path from her perspective, I can now see that this has always been my path. All pagans, whilst being polytheistic, have one central deity that they most identify with. Mine is the goddess Diana. I have always struggled with friendships with men. It's all about rugby, barbecues, beer, and who's got the flashiest car, although I still love the first 3. I came to a crossroads in 2010. I had been very successful as a man, well, externally anyway. I had 3 sons and a stepdaughter and a wife who loved the man I presented on the outside. All of this answered many of the early questions I had had about why I was how I was, but despite my success, I was really struggling with the me on the inside. After 40 years, she was clearly not going away. I tried ignoring her. I've tried allowing her a little outlet now and then. That it just wasn't enough anymore. The outside of me just wasn't in sync with the inside of me. My first wife and I discussed my feelings, and she made it clear to me that she needed a man. Hairy chest, hairy arms, short stubby fingernails. Of course she wouldn't be happy if I was a beer-swilling chauvinist and loved the fact that I'm empathetic, feminine in my approach to life. But cut those nails, don't grow your hair, or shave your legs. By late 2010, my first wife had won so many rounds in the divorce court. I had lost my relationship with my sons. I was broke and work was getting harder and harder to get. I was working on a project at a company in South Africa, which was a government-owned organisation. And one of the managers there told me and my team that he didn't need a bunch of white boys telling me how to do his job. At that point I realised I'd overstayed my welcome, and we set off for the UK. I pushed my trans feelings to the back of my mind, took this as another fresh start. My first job in the UK lasted a year, and they asked me to leave with a hefty severance. The next one, 2 years, and they asked me to leave again with a hefty severance. The third one, a year, and again, they asked me to leave again with a heavy severance. It wasn't that I wasn't good at the contents of my job, I just struggled to get along with my colleagues. I was too soft, or too hard, or too disrespectful. By now it was late 2015. I had started dressing at home again, and my second wife found a bra. We had a huge fight, and I agreed I would man up. This was November in 2015. The next day I lost my job again. I was starting for the first time in my life to feel suicidal. The song Free Falling was constantly in my head, and I thought that that's what I needed to do. Free fall from some tall building. I decided I would contract rather than take a full-time job, as I figured it would be easier to leave when I started pissing people off. I got a contract in January 2016. I was still really suicidal. Then my wife found my alternative Facebook profile. She flipped out. She said it was the end, I needed to move out, and we were done. On the train into work the next day, I finally got what that song was saying. Just let go. Stop trying to force things, and for the first time, try embracing who I am. I got in touch with some of my new trans friends and had numerous offers of accommodation. When I got home that day, though, my wife and the kids were waiting for me. She said she was devastated by the situation, but she still loved me and she and the kids didn't want me to leave. She said, though, that she was still straight and couldn't see herself in a conjugal relationship with a woman. So from then on we decided to live together, but more as sisters and still parents to our kids. We decided to move to Brighton, which is a very progressive city, and I got a new contract with Southern Water, which is based in Brighton. At first I only dressed as me at home, but in May 2016 I decided to come out full-time at work and socially and source medical help to begin my transition. Work was really cool about it, and they were really supportive. I started meeting many new people and making many new friends, and for the first time I was meeting them as the real me. Externally, I didn't look particularly convincing, but internally I felt whole. Since then, rather than being asked to leave my job, I've been extended 6 times. By the time my contract expires, I will have been with them for 2 years. Such a contrast to the 3 jobs in almost as many years. I was living an authentic life, and it was so much more rewarding. After 47 years, I was finally me. Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed that story. That got me up to about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Quite a lot has changed since then. So if I get positive feedback on this video, I will tell you the rest of the story. But for now, let's just enjoy the ride and some of the beautiful scenery around southern England. This is definitely one of the best things I love about riding a motorcycle. Sunny weekend away, look at all these poor suckers stuck in traffic jams. Here we go, sliding through the middle. Oh, I love it. Well, rested, refueled the body, refueled the bike, and here we go again. Really lovely weather this time of year, and still enjoying the ride. It's starting to get a little bit long though. Hopefully, nearly there. This is one of the really weird parts of riding on motorways. Is you'll see here everything's backed up, and then in a few minutes it all frees up again, and then no real reason why it had come to a stop in the first place. Answers in the comments if you can explain to me why this seems to happen all the time. Right, so we're off. Here we go again. Oh, cute car alert on the left. So basically this is the point where I ran out of SD cards, so I hope you enjoyed this much of the journey at any rate. This would have been 3 hours in the saddle. Definitely took a lot longer than the GPS said it would, but that's the nature of the trip, isn't it? Anyway, at the end of this bit, I'll go into some pictures and bits from the weekend. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you've enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed making it, and I enjoyed the trip. I do feel a little bit like this today, I have to be quite honest, but I'll leave you with an inspirational quote that was sent to me by my very best friend. So that's it for now. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.